I don't remember the first time I realized I was unwanted. It wasn't a single moment, not a sharp pain that arrived and stayed. It was quieter than that, slower. Like a shadow stretching longer each day without you noticing, until suddenly it covers everything. My earliest memories are filled with small things that didn't make sense back then. My brother laughing loudly in the living room while my mother smiled at him like he was the center of her universe. My father bringing home gifts, remote control cars, sneakers, video games, but never once asking me what I liked. I used to sit on the stairs, watching from a distance, waiting for someone to call my name. No one ever did. I was 6 when I first tried to understand it. My brother had fallen while playing outside, scraping his knee. It wasn't even that bad, just a little blood, but my mother rushed to him like the world had ended. She held his face, kissed his forehead, and told him over and over how brave he was. That same day, I accidentally cut my finger while trying to help in the kitchen. I remember staring at the blood, feeling scared, my heart racing. I went to her, holding my hand out. She didn't even look properly. "Stop being dramatic," she said, her voice cold and sharp. "It's nothing." That was the first time I felt something crack inside me. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't scream. I just stood there, confused, trying to understand why his pain mattered and mine didn't. I went to the bathroom, washed my own wound, and wrapped it with tissue. I told myself it didn't hurt. But it did. Not the cut, the feeling. As I grew older, the difference became clearer. It wasn't just in moments of pain. It was in everything. At dinner, my brother got the bigger portion. If there was only one piece of something special, it was automatically his. If I ever asked for it, the room would go silent for a second before my mother's eyes would narrow. "Don't be selfish," she would say. "He needs it more." I used to wonder, why does he need everything more than me? But I never asked that question out loud. I learned early that asking questions didn't bring answers. It brought anger. School became my escape. I studied hard, not because anyone asked me to, but because it was the only place I felt seen. My teachers would praise me, tell me I was smart, hardworking. For a few hours each day, I felt like I existed. I still remember the day I got the highest score in my class. I was so excited, holding the paper tightly as I ran home. My heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from hope. Maybe this time, they would be proud. I walked into the house and found my mother in the living room. I stood in front of her, smiling nervously, and handed her the paper. "I got the highest marks," I said softly. She glanced at it for less than a second. "Good," she replied, placing it aside like it was nothing. That was it. No smile, no hug, no "I'm proud of you." Just good. Later that evening, my brother came home with average grades. Nothing special, nothing impressive. But my father clapped him on the back, laughing. "That's my boy," he said proudly. They ordered pizza that night to celebrate. I sat there, quietly eating, staring at the table, feeling something heavy settle in my chest. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was something deeper. It was the realization that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. I started trying harder after that. If good wasn't enough, I would be perfect. I woke up earlier than everyone else. I did all my homework, helped around the house, kept my rooms spotless. I memorized lessons, participated in every activity, stayed quiet, stayed obedient. I thought maybe love had rules. Maybe if I followed them perfectly, I would finally earn it. But love doesn't work like that, at least not in my house. One night, I overheard something that changed me forever. I was walking past my parents' room when I heard my mother's voice. She sounded tired, almost irritated. "I don't understand her," she said. "She's always trying too hard, it's annoying." I froze. My father chuckled lightly. "She's just like that. Girls are emotional." Then my mother said something I will never forget. "I wish she was a boy. Life would have been easier." The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, unable to move, my heart pounding so loudly I thought they might hear it. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. I wish she was a boy. In that moment, everything made sense. It wasn't about me. It never was. I wasn't loved, not because I wasn't good enough, but because I wasn't what they wanted. I was just a daughter. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow, biting my hand to keep from making a sound. I didn't want anyone to hear me. I didn't want to be told again that I was being dramatic. After that, something inside me began to change. I stopped expecting things. I stopped waiting for my name to be called. I stopped hopping. But even when you try to kill hope, a small part of it stays alive, hidden somewhere deep inside. And that part kept whispering to me, telling me to try just one more time. So I did. On my 10th birthday, I decided I would ask for something simple. Not a gift, not a party. Just love. I spent the whole day gathering courage. My hands were shaking as I approached my mother in the kitchen. "Can I ask you something?" I said softly. She didn't look up. "What?" "Do you love me?" The silence that followed felt endless. She finally turned, her expression unreadable. "Why would you ask something so stupid?" My throat tightened. I just wanted to know. She sighed, clearly annoyed. "Of course I do. You're my daughter." But there was no warmth in her voice, no softness, just obligation. It didn't feel like love. It felt like a duty she never wanted. That answer stayed with me for years. "You're my daughter." Not "I love you." Not "you mean everything to me." Just "you're my daughter." As if that alone explained everything. As if that was enough. But it was. Because being her daughter felt like being invisible. And no matter how much I begged, silently, desperately, I never got anything except the same cold distance, while my brother continued to receive all the warmth I had ever dreamed of. And that was only the beginning. After that question, after I asked my mother if she loved me, something in the house changed, even though nothing physically did. The walls were the same. The furniture was the same. The same morning sunlight still fell through the kitchen window at the same angle. But I changed. Or maybe I finally saw things as they really were. I stopped asking questions after that. Not because I got answers, but because I realized answers didn't matter in a place where truth was already decided before you spoke. In my home, truth was simple. My brother was the pride. And I was the background. I began to notice the smallest details even more clearly after that day. Like how my mother's voice would instantly soften when she spoke to my brother, even if she was angry just seconds before. Or how she would stop everything she was doing if he called her name, even casually. But when I spoke, "I'll talk later," was her favorite line. Later never came. My father wasn't much different. He wasn't cruel in loud ways. He didn't shout at me every day or openly insult me. His neglect was quieter, more comfortable for him. The kind that doesn't feel like violence to the one doing it. He would come home tired, sit in front of the television, and ask about my brother's day. Only my brother's. If I ever tried to speak, he would nod without looking at me properly, like I was a distant noise in the background of his real life. Sometimes I used to wonder if I was invisible, not metaphorically, but literally, like maybe I wasn't fully there in their eyes. At school, I tried to build a different world. I became the quiet, smart girl, the one teachers trusted, the one classmates copied homework from, the one who never caused trouble. It became my identity. Because at home, I didn't have one. There was a girl in my class named Emily. She was loud, confident, always laughing. She talked about her parents like they were her best friends. One day, she asked me something that I still remember clearly. "Do you tell your mom everything?" I hesitated. Everything. I didn't even tell her anything. So I just smiled and said, "Not really." Emily nodded like it was normal. "Yeah, I tell mine everything, even dumb stuff. She always listens." That sentence stayed in my head for a long time. She always listens. I couldn't imagine that. In my house, listening meant waiting for your turn to be ignored. Still, I kept trying at school. I studied harder. I pushed myself. Not because I wanted praise anymore, but because it was the only place where effort didn't feel completely useless. At least there, results meant something. At home, results meant nothing unless they belonged to my brother. One evening, I came home with a certificate from school. It was for academic excellence. My teacher had announced my name in front of the whole class. People clapped. For a few seconds, I felt seen. That feeling didn't last long. I walked into the house holding the certificate carefully, like it was fragile hope. My brother was in the living room playing a video game. My mother was folding laundry. "I got an award today," I said. My voice wasn't loud. I had learned not to be loud. My mother looked over, paused for a second, then nodded. "That's nice." She went back to folding. That was it again. That same empty response. "That's nice." Like I was talking about the weather. I stood there waiting, just for a moment longer, thinking maybe she would ask what it was for, or maybe even smile. But she didn't. So I walked to my room. Halfway down the hallway, I heard my mother suddenly laugh from the living room. My brother had apparently done something in his game, something small, something meaningless to the world outside that screen, but she laughed like it was the most important thing in the world. I closed my door quietly. And that night, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because I was starting to feel something else instead. Something colder. Something quieter. I started noticing patterns. If my brother spoke, it mattered. If I spoke, it was background noise. If he made a mistake, it was boys will be boys. If I made a mistake, it was disappointment. If he was quiet, he was mature. If I was quiet, I was distant or rude. It was like I was living under a rule book I was never given, constantly punished for breaking rules I didn't know existed. One night, I heard my parents talking again. This time I wasn't passing by. I was standing outside my own room, frozen. My mother's voice was tired. "She should start helping more at home. She's getting older." My father replied, "She'll get married soon anyway. Don't worry too much." There it was again. Not my name. Not my future. Just, she'll get married. As if my entire existence was a waiting room for someone else's life. I went into my room and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. Marriage. That word used to feel far away. Now it suddenly felt like a door closing slowly behind me. Not freedom. Not escape. Just transfer from one kind of invisibility to another. I started writing things down after that. Not stories, not poems. Just thoughts. Things I couldn't say out loud. I am here. I exist. I matter. I wrote them over and over again, like repetition might turn them into truth. But the more I wrote, the more I realized something painful. I wasn't trying to convince anyone else. I was trying to convince myself. At home, things continued as always. My brother got new clothes, new shoes, new attention. I got expectations. Be responsible. Don't argue. Help your brother. Understand him. Always him. Never me. One afternoon, something happened that felt small to them, but broke something in me completely. My brother had broken my notebook. It wasn't intentional. He had just been careless, flipping through it and tearing pages. Years of notes, my thoughts, my private world. Gone in seconds. I picked it up, shocked, holding the torn pages. "He didn't mean it," my mother said immediately before I even spoke. "Stop overreacting." I looked at her. "I worked on this for months," I said quietly. She didn't even hesitate. "You can always write again. Don't make a drama out of everything." But I wasn't making a drama. I was mourning. Not just paper, but the idea that anything I built mattered. That night, I sat on my bed holding the torn notebook, and something inside me finally stopped hopping. Not completely, but enough to feel different. enough to change the way I looked at everything. Because I finally understood something I had been avoiding for years. In my house, I wasn't competing for love. I was never in the race at all. And still, somehow, I kept running. After the notebook incident, something inside me became quieter than before. Not calm, not peaceful, just quieter in a way that felt dangerous. Like a room after a storm where nothing is moving, but you know the damage is everywhere. I stopped showing people my work after that. At school, I still studied. I still answered questions. I still smiled when needed. But I kept everything inside me now, like locking doors one by one and deciding no one would ever be allowed in again. Because every time I had shared something before, it had either been ignored or dismissed. So I learned. Don't share, don't expect, don't wait. Just exist. That became my new routine. Home remained unchanged, as if frozen in its own pattern. My brother's presence filled every space. His voice, his laughter, his complaints, his needs. Even when he wasn't in the room, the energy of him was still there, like he was the main character of a story I was only allowed to observe from the margins. My mother once asked me to help her with cleaning the house. I did it without complaint. But when my brother refused to do something small she asked of him, she just sighed and did it herself. No anger. No frustration. Just acceptance. Like his refusal was normal. Like mine would never be. I began to understand something uncomfortable. Rules in my house weren't rules. They were preferences. And I wasn't preferred. One day at school, something unexpected happened. We had a group project. I was assigned with 3 other students, including a boy named Daniel. He was loud, confident, and very sure of himself, even when he was wrong. At first, I didn't speak much. That was my habit now. But when the teacher asked a question, I gave the correct answer. The group went silent for a moment. Then Daniel repeated it, louder, as if it was his idea. No one corrected him. Not even me. Because I had learned something at home that followed me everywhere. Being right doesn't matter if no one is willing to hear you. But something strange happened later. One of the girls in the group, Sarah, pulled me aside after class. "You're really smart," she said. It wasn't a big moment, just a simple sentence. But I felt something uncomfortable in my chest. Because I didn't know what to do with kindness anymore. At home, kindness had conditions. At school, it felt unfamiliar. "Thanks," I replied awkwardly. She smiled. "You should speak up more. Daniel keeps taking credit for your ideas." I shrugged. "It doesn't matter." But she frowned. "It does matter." I didn't answer. Because I didn't believe her. That night, I sat in my room longer than usual. It kept repeating in my head. It does matter. But everything in my life had taught me otherwise. Weeks passed like that. Same routine, same silence, same imbalance. Until one evening, something shifted slightly. My father called me into the living room. I remember standing there unsure. That rarely happened, being called directly. My brother was already sitting beside him. My mother was nearby. My father looked serious, in a way I wasn't used to. "You need to start thinking about your future," he said. I nodded slowly. He continued, "We've been discussing it. After school, you'll go to college nearby, nothing too far." I didn't say anything. Then my mother added, "And we'll start looking for proposals in a few years." There it was again. That word. Proposals. As if my life was a formality waiting to be processed. My brother smirked slightly. "She'll probably just stay home anyway." He said it like a joke. No one corrected him. I stood there, feeling my throat tighten. Not anger. Not sadness. Just recognition. This was my future being decided like a schedule. Without me. I finally spoke quietly. "I want to study out of state." Silence. My father looked at me like I had said something unreasonable. Why? He asked simply. I hesitated. Better opportunities. My mother sighed immediately. You don't need to go far for that. My brother laughed under his breath. You wouldn't manage anyway. That sentence hit harder than I expected. Not because it was true, but because it was said so easily. Like it was already decided, I couldn't manage anything. I looked at my father again. I can, I said. My voice was small but steady. He shook his head slowly. This discussion is over. That was it. Not a conversation. A conclusion. I walked back to my room afterward and sat on the floor for a long time. No tears. Just stillness. Because something inside me had stopped expecting permission. And when you stop expecting permission, you start noticing how many doors were never meant to open for you. A few days later, I got my exam results. Top marks again. My teacher called it outstanding. I felt nothing when I saw it. Not pride. Not excitement. Just familiarity. I knew what would happen next. At home, I showed my mother. She glanced at it. Good, she said again. That same word. Good. Empty, recycled, automatic. Then she added, Your brother has exams next week. Help him study. That was it. My achievement became background noise to his preparation. That night, I sat on my bed and realized something clearly for the first time. My success didn't elevate me in their eyes. It only made me more useful. Not valued. Useful. There's a difference I didn't understand until then. Valued means you matter. Useful means you serve. I was not being raised as someone who mattered. I was being raised as someone who served. And that realization changed something deep inside me. I stopped imagining praise. I stopped imagining approval. I stopped imagining a version of them that would finally see me. Because that version didn't exist. One afternoon, I overheard my mother talking to a relative on the phone. Her voice was softer, almost proud. Our son is very bright, she said. We're very proud of him. Son. Always son. Never daughter. I stood in the hallway listening, feeling something settle heavily in my chest. Not jealousy anymore. Just confirmation. I wasn't competing with my brother. I was categorized differently from him. And categories don't change. That night, I wrote in my notebook again. The new one I had started after the old one was destroyed. But this time, I didn't write hopes. I wrote facts. My brother is loved without effort. I am expected to earn everything and still receive nothing. I am present, but not important. When I finished, I closed the notebook and placed it under my pillow. Not for comfort, but for proof. Proof that I was still thinking. Still noticing. Still here. And somewhere deep inside, even though I tried to silence it, a small thought remained alive. Not hope. Something more fragile than hope. A question I couldn't fully erase yet. What happens to a daughter who begs for love and is never answered? The days started blending together after that. Not because nothing was happening, but because everything felt the same, predictable, repeated, unchanged no matter what I did. Morning, school, home, silence, sleep. Again and again. I stopped marking time by days and started marking it by moments instead. The moment my brother was praised. The moment I was ignored. The moment I realized nothing would shift. That became my rhythm. At school, I began to notice something new. People were starting to rely on me more. If there was confusion in class, they looked at me. If someone forgot homework, they asked me. If a teacher needed an answer quickly, my name came first. It should have felt good. But it didn't feel like recognition. It felt like convenience. Even there, I wasn't truly seen. I was used. And somehow, I had learned to accept that too. One afternoon, Sarah approached me again after class. "You're always helping everyone," she said, "but who helps you?" I looked at her, confused by the question. "I'm fine," I replied automatically. She frowned. "That's not what I asked." I didn't respond, because I didn't know how to answer something I had never experienced. Who helps me? No one. But saying it out loud felt too heavy, too final. So I stayed quiet. Sarah sighed softly. "You don't have to carry everything alone, you know." I nodded, even though I didn't believe her. Because in my world, carrying everything alone wasn't optional. It was expected. At home, things were becoming more structured around my brother's future. Private tutors, extra classes, conversations about colleges. My mother would spend hours discussing his potential with relatives. My name rarely came up unless it was about chores, responsibilities, or what I could do to support him. One evening, I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I overheard my parents again. My father's voice was calm. "She should learn to adjust. Life isn't always about what you want." My mother replied, "She'll understand eventually." Understand what? That question kept echoing in my head. What exactly was I supposed to understand? That I mattered less. That I was optional. That love in my house came with conditions I was never given. I turned off the tap slowly, my hands still in the water, staring at nothing. Something inside me felt tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Not physical tiredness. Something deeper. Like my thoughts were carrying more weight than I could hold. One night, something happened that I still remember clearly, not because it was dramatic, but because it was so ordinary. My brother came into my room without knocking. He always did that. No hesitation, no boundaries. He picked up my notebook from my desk. "What's this?" he asked, flipping through it. "Don't," I said quickly. He ignored me. He read a few lines, then laughed. "You write like you're in a movie," he said, tossing it back on the bed. I felt my stomach tighten. "Don't touch my things," I said again, firmer this time. He looked at me like I had said something strange. "It's just a notebook." Then he left. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just dismissal. Later that night, I went to my mother. He was sitting in the living room with her. I stood there for a moment before speaking. "He keeps going into my room and touching my things," I said quietly. My mother didn't even look surprised. "He's your brother," she replied. That was it. That sentence again. "He's your brother." As if that explained everything. As if that erased everything. I waited for something more. Nothing came. So I turned around and walked away. That night, I didn't write in my notebook. For the first time, I didn't feel like it would change anything. At school the next day, I got called to the principal's office. For a second, I thought I had done something wrong. But when I arrived, I found Sarah waiting there too. The principal smiled politely. "We want you both to participate in a regional academic competition," he said. Sarah immediately looked excited. I didn't react. Competing meant attention. Attention meant expectations. Expectations meant pressure. Still, I nodded. Because saying no wasn't something I had learned how to do. Sarah turned to me as we left the office. "This is amazing," she said. "We'll prepare together." I forced a small smile. "Sure." But inside, I already felt the weight of it. Everything good in my life came with pressure attached. At home, when I told my parents, my brother reacted first. "A competition," he said, smirking. "Don't embarrass us." My mother looked mildly interested for the first time. "Try not to get too distracted," she said. "Your brother has important exams coming." There it was again. My achievement placed beneath his schedule. Not celebrated. Managed. I went to my room early that night. I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the blank page. For once, I didn't know what to write. Not because I had nothing to say, but because everything I had been saying had never changed anything. Sarah's words came back to me. You don't have to carry everything alone. But I wasn't carrying it alone. I was carrying it while being told it wasn't heavy. That's what made it worse. The next few weeks were filled with preparation. Sarah was energetic, full of ideas, always optimistic. I tried to match her energy, but something inside me resisted. Not her. The idea of trying. Because trying had never guaranteed anything for me. Still, I showed up. Still, I worked. Still, I did what I always did. A week before the competition, Sarah stayed back after class. I think we can actually win this, she said, smiling. I nodded slowly. Maybe. She tilted her head. You don't believe it. I hesitated. I don't know what believing changes, I said honestly. Her smile faded slightly. It changes how you try. I looked away. Because in my life, trying harder had never changed how I was received. Only how much I was expected to tolerate. That night, I overheard something that stayed with me longer than anything else that week. My mother was talking to a relative again. This time, her tone was proud. Our son is preparing for his future, she said. We're very focused on him right now. Focused. That word again. As if attention itself was a limited resource. And I was never on the list. I stood outside the kitchen doorway listening, feeling something inside me shift, not break, not explode. Just shift. Like something had finally settled into its final place. Not hope. Not anger. Something quieter. Something heavier. Acceptance, maybe. But not the peaceful kind. The kind that comes when you stop expecting storms to change direction. And somewhere in that silence, I realized something I had been avoiding for years. I was still asking for love in a place that had already decided I wouldn't receive it. And yet, I hadn't stopped asking. Not yet. The morning of the competition arrived without feeling special. There was no excitement in my chest like I thought there would be. No nervous anticipation that felt like hope. Just a quiet heaviness, like I was moving through something I had already lived before. I got ready slowly, watching myself in the mirror longer than usual. Not because I cared how I looked, but because I was trying to recognize myself. Some days I felt like I was still the same girl who once believed effort would be enough. Other days, I felt like I had already become someone else entirely, someone who simply followed instructions for life without expecting meaning from it. At school, Sarah was already waiting near the entrance. You came early, she said, smiling. I nodded. You okay? She asked, studying my face. I'm fine, I replied like always. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. We went through the preparations together, reviewing notes, practicing answers, going over possible questions. Sarah was enthusiastic, full of energy that didn't seem to run out. I tried to match it, but something inside me stayed distant, like I was watching myself participate from far away. When the competition began, the hall was full of students from different schools. Noise, movement, tension everywhere. Teams were called one by one. Each time a name was announced, applause followed. I clapped too, mechanically, without really feeling it. Then our turn came. Sarah squeezed my hand lightly. Let's do this, she said. I nodded. We stepped forward. The questions started easy, then gradually became harder. Sarah answered some confidently. I answered others when needed. We worked like a system that functioned without emotion. At one point, there was a question that made the room quiet. No one on our team spoke immediately. I knew the answer. I knew it clearly. But I hesitated. Not because I didn't know. Because I had learned what happens when you speak in places where your voice is not expected. Still, I answered. My voice was steady. The judge nodded. Sarah glanced at me and smiled slightly. For a second, something almost warm flickered inside me. Almost. But it didn't stay. After the round ended, we returned to our seats. Sarah leaned closer. "That was amazing," she whispered. "You saved us on that one." I gave a small nod. "Yeah." But even as she smiled, I didn't feel what I was supposed to feel. Winning, helping, contributing, it all felt distant. Like I was performing a role I had played too many times without ever being part of the story. When the results were announced later, our team didn't win first place. We placed second. Sarah still looked happy. "We did great," she said. "Second place is still huge." People clapped around us. I clapped too. Because that's what you do when something good happens. Even if it doesn't feel like yours. On the way home, Sarah talked about next time. "We can improve. We were so close," she said. I listened, nodding occasionally. But my mind was elsewhere. Not on the competition. Not on the result. On something smaller. Something older. When I reached home, the atmosphere felt unchanged. My brother was on the couch, watching something on TV. My mother was in the kitchen. My father wasn't home yet. I stood in the doorway for a second, holding my bag. No one asked how it went. No one noticed I was back. I already knew they wouldn't. Still, I said it. "We got second place in the competition." My brother glanced at me. "Not first," he said, smiling slightly. My mother called from the kitchen without turning. "That's good." That same word again. Good. Empty, dismissive, familiar. I stood there waiting for something more. Nothing came. So I went to my room. I closed the door and sat on the edge of my bed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel disappointment. Not exactly. I felt something closer to clarity. Because I had started to notice a pattern that no longer needed proving. I could achieve things. I could succeed. I could outperform. And still nothing changed. Not their tone. Not their attention. Not my place in the house. It was fixed. Like furniture that no one moves anymore. Later that evening, I heard my parents talking again. This time, I wasn't passing by. I stopped. My mother's voice was calm. "She's becoming more independent," she said. My father replied, "That's fine, as long as she doesn't get ideas." Ideas. That word made me pause. My mother sighed softly. "She needs to understand her role." Role. Not dreams. Not future. Role. I stood there silently, feeling something tighten in my chest. Not pain exactly. More like recognition, becoming impossible to ignore. I was not being raised. I was being assigned. That night, I didn't write in my notebook. Instead, I sat in silence and thought about Sarah's words again. You don't have to carry everything alone. But I realized something important. Even if I stopped carrying it alone, I still had to carry it. Because no one else in my life had ever picked it up. The next day at school, Sarah noticed my silence. "You've been quiet," she said. "I always am," I replied lightly. She shook her head. "No, this is different." I didn't answer. Because she was right. Something had changed. But I didn't know how to explain it. Not even to myself. During lunch, she asked again. "Do you ever think about what you want after school?" I paused. "What I want," I repeated. She nodded. I looked down at my tray. The question felt foreign. Like it didn't belong to me. "I don't know," I said finally. Sarah frowned. "That's not normal," she said softly. I almost smiled. Because in my world, normal had never included me. That evening, I found out my brother had been accepted into a special coaching program. My mother was overjoyed. She hugged him immediately, her face bright with pride. My father congratulated him, smiling. There was excitement everywhere. Noise, celebration, energy. I stood in the background, watching. No one looked at me. And I realized something then. This was what recognition looked like in my house. Not fairness. Not equality. Not effort. Just belonging to the right category. My brother belonged. I did not. Later that night, I heard laughter from the living room. My brother showing something on his phone. My parents laughing with him. I stayed in my room, sitting in silence, listening to the sound of a world I was technically part of, but never included in. And for the first time, I didn't feel like asking why anymore. Because I was starting to understand the answer. Not everything is explained. Some things are simply lived and endured. And somewhere deep inside that silence, something in me began to harden, not into anger, not into rebellion, but into awareness. A quiet, irreversible awareness that love in my house was never absent. It was just never meant for me. After the competition, life didn't change in any visible way. That was the strange part. Big moments inside me never matched what happened outside. Inside, I felt like something had shifted permanently. Outside, everything stayed exactly the same. Same house, same voices, same silence directed toward me. If anything, I became more aware of it now. Like I had been blind before and suddenly learned how to see everything at once. At school, Sarah tried to keep things normal between us. She still talked to me, still sat with me, still included me. But I felt myself pulling away without meaning to. Not from her. From everything. Because every time someone treated me kindly, it created a strange discomfort inside me. Like I didn't know where to place it. Kindness felt like something I had to return immediately or lose. And I never felt like I had enough to give back. One afternoon, Sarah asked me something again. "You never talk about your family," she said casually. I looked at her for a moment, then away. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. She didn't respond right away. That silence felt different. Not judging, just observing. Finally, she said softly, "That's not true." I didn't answer, because I didn't want to lie. But I also didn't want to explain. Explaining my house felt like opening a door I had spent years locking. And I wasn't sure what would spill out if I opened it again. At home, things became more focused on my brother's achievements. His coaching program started. His schedule became strict. His future became the central topic of every conversation. Our house adjusted itself around him without effort. Even dinner timings changed to match his routine. I noticed how easily everything bent for him, and how nothing bent for me. One evening, I asked my mother if I could attend a college workshop in another city. It was a small request, just a day trip. She didn't even hesitate. "No," she said immediately. I blinked. "It's just for one day," I said quietly. She continued folding clothes. "You don't need to go anywhere," she replied. That sentence again. You don't need. Not you cannot. Not we will see. Just you don't need. As if my desire itself was unnecessary. I stood there for a moment longer, waiting for something. An explanation. A reason. A pause. Nothing came. So I turned away. In my room later, I sat staring at the wall. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something more exhausting. The realization that asking had become pointless. Not because I wasn't allowed, but because my asking didn't register as valid in the first place. At school the next day, Sarah noticed I was quieter than usual. "You're slipping away again," she said. I looked at her. I'm here, I replied. She shook her head slightly. That's not what I mean. I didn't respond, because I knew what she meant. And I didn't know how to stay fully present in a world where I was never fully included. During lunch, she tried again. My mom says I overthink everything, she said with a small laugh. But I think people who don't think enough are the ones who get hurt. I glanced at her. That doesn't make sense, I said. She smiled. It does if you've seen enough. That line stayed with me longer than I expected. Because I had seen enough too. Just not in the same way she meant. That evening, something happened that shifted things slightly at home. My brother failed a practice test. It wasn't serious, just a small setback. But the reaction was immediate. My mother became tense. My father became quiet. The house changed atmosphere instantly. I had never seen that kind of reaction to anything I did. Even when I succeeded. Especially when I succeeded. But this failure, this small one, became important. My mother spent the evening helping him revise. My father checked on him repeatedly. Their attention wrapped around him like protection. I stood in the hallway watching once. Not out of curiosity. Out of confusion. Because I was finally seeing something clearly. Attention in my house wasn't about achievement. It was about attachment. My brother was attached. I was not. That was the difference. Later that night, I heard my mother speaking to my father. He gets stressed easily, she said softly. We need to be careful with him. My father replied, he's sensitive, that's all. Sensitive. Careful. Protected. Words I had never heard applied to me. Even once. I stood outside my room listening, my hands slowly curling into fists without realizing it. Not because I wanted anger, but because something inside me was trying to understand a pattern that no longer made sense to ignore. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I had to. Because I couldn't sleep. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. There was no dramatic change. No visible difference. But I felt it. Something inside me had shifted again. More awareness. Less confusion. Less hope. I went to school that day and sat with Sarah like normal. But she noticed immediately. You didn't sleep, she said. I shrugged. It's fine. She studied me. You say that a lot. I didn't respond. Because I didn't know what else to say. During class, I found myself distracted. Not by thoughts. By absence. By the growing realization that my life had become a series of reactions to things I never chose. After school, Sarah stopped me before I left. Come with me somewhere, she said. I hesitated. Where? She smiled slightly. You'll see. I followed her. We walked for a while, past familiar streets, then unfamiliar ones. Eventually, we reached a small library. It wasn't anything special, but it was quiet. Sarah walked in confidently. I followed slowly. Inside, she picked a table near a window. This is where I come when everything feels too loud, she said. I looked around. It wasn't loud here. Not in the way I was used to. She handed me a book. Try this, she said. I looked at it. Then at her. I don't really read for fun, I admitted. She tilted her head. Then start. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I sat there feeling something unfamiliar. Not pressure. Not expectation. Just space. For the first time in a long time. That night, I brought the book home. I didn't expect to read it, but I placed it on my desk anyway. Like something I wasn't ready to admit I needed. At dinner, my brother talked about his test again. This time, he was doing better. The mood lifted instantly. Laughter returned. Pride returned. Everything returned. Except me. I ate quietly, listening. And in that moment, I realized something that didn't hurt as sharply as before. It was just clear. I didn't need to compete. I wasn't part of the comparison at all. I was outside it. Always had been. And that night, for the first time, I opened the book Sarah gave me. Not because I wanted escape, but because I needed something that didn't remind me of home. And as I read the first few pages in silence, I didn't feel hope returning. I felt something else. A slow, steady understanding beginning to form. And once understanding begins, it doesn't stay quiet for long. The book Sarah gave me didn't change my life overnight. It didn't fix anything. It didn't suddenly make home feel warmer or make people see me differently. But it gave me something I hadn't realized I was missing. A pause. A place where my thoughts didn't immediately get pushed aside by someone else's voice. I started reading it slowly, only a few pages at a time. Not because it was difficult, but because I wasn't used to keeping something for myself without guilt. At home, everything had always been shared, controlled, or judged. Even silence didn't belong to me. It was just what happened when I wasn't being spoken to. But reading felt different. It felt like something that didn't ask permission to exist. Days passed like that. School, library, home, book. Repeat. Sarah noticed I was carrying the book with me. "You're reading it?" she asked one day. I nodded. Slowly. She smiled. "That's fine, it's not a race." That sentence stayed with me. It's not a race. Because everything else in my life felt like one. At home, my brother's world kept expanding. New classes, new praise, new attention. My parents were constantly involved in his progress. It was like watching a spotlight follow him everywhere he went. And I was just standing outside its reach. One evening, I was sitting in the living room doing homework when my father asked my brother about his studies. My brother explained something confidently. My father nodded proudly. Then, almost as an afterthought, my father looked at me. "You're helping him with studies, right?" It wasn't a question. It was an assumption. I nodded. Yes. That was it. No acknowledgement of my own work. No question about my school. Just my role in his life. That night, I sat in my room longer than usual. The book lay open beside me. But I wasn't reading. I was thinking about roles again. Daughter. Son. Helper. Pride. Invisible. Assigned, not chosen. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I began to understand something uncomfortable. I wasn't being ignored randomly. I was being placed. And once you are placed somewhere in someone's mind, it becomes very hard to move. The next day at school, Sarah seemed more serious than usual. "Are you coming to the study session this weekend?" she asked. I hesitated. "I don't know," I said. She frowned slightly. "You can't keep disappearing like this." I looked at her. "I'm not disappearing." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. Because I could feel myself pulling inward more and more. Not away from people. Away from expectation. Sarah leaned back in her chair. "You know," she said slowly, "you act like you're waiting for permission to exist properly." I stiffened slightly. That was too close. Too accurate. I didn't respond. She continued, "No one is going to give you that permission." I looked away. Because I already knew. But hearing it out loud made it heavier. After school, I didn't go straight home. I went to the library instead. The librarian recognized me now. I sat in my usual spot near the window and opened the book again. This time, I read longer. Not because I suddenly loved it, but because I was starting to understand something through it. The idea that other lives existed where people were not constantly measured. Not constantly compared. Not constantly reduced. It felt almost unreal. At home that evening, the atmosphere was different. My brother was frustrated. His studies weren't going as smoothly. He was quieter than usual. My mother noticed immediately. She sat with him, talking gently. My father tried to help. Everything shifted around him again. Even stress became something they shared with him. I watched from the corner of the room. Not visible. Not included. Just present. Later, my mother asked me to prepare dinner. I did. While cooking, I overheard her speaking softly to my father. "He's under pressure," she said. "We should not expect too much." My father replied, "He just needs time." Time. Support. Understanding. I stirred the pot slowly, listening. And I realized something I hadn't fully accepted before. Even failure would not remove him from their center. He was not valued only when he succeeded. He was valued even when he struggled. That safety net existed for him. Not for me. The next day at school, I felt more detached than usual. Sarah noticed immediately. "You're somewhere else today," she said. I gave a small shrug. "Just tired." She didn't push. But later, during lunch, she said something unexpected. "My mom always says people learn their value from how they're treated at home," she said. I looked at her. "That sounds simple," I replied. She smiled slightly. "It is simple, but not easy." I stayed quiet. Because I didn't know where I fell in that idea anymore. At home, something small happened that stayed with me. My brother asked for help with something. Not school. Just a simple technical issue. My father immediately called me. "Help him," he said. I did. It took a few minutes. After I finished, my brother didn't say thank you. He just went back to what he was doing. My father didn't acknowledge it either. It was expected. Not appreciated. That difference kept echoing in my mind. Expected V's appreciated. Useful V's valued. Present versus seen. Later that night, I sat in my room holding the book. I wasn't reading. I was thinking. About Sarah's words. About my house. About the way I had learned to shrink myself without being told directly to do so. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was gradual. Like water shaping stone over time. And I realized something that made my chest feel strangely tight. No one had ever told me I didn't matter. They had just lived as if I didn't. There is a difference. And somehow, that difference hurts more. Because it doesn't give you something to fight against. Just something to notice. I closed the book and placed it aside. Then I wrote something in my notebook again. Not a hope. Not a wish. Just a truth forming slowly. I am not unseen because I am invisible. I am unseen because I am not looked at. When I finished writing, I stared at the page for a long time. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to immediately erase it. I just let it stay there, as if acknowledging it was enough for now. And somewhere deep inside that quiet room, something subtle shifted again. Not healing. Not breaking. Just becoming harder to ignore. After writing those words in my notebook, I couldn't bring myself to close it immediately. I just kept staring at the page, as if staring longer might make the truth soften. But it didn't. It stayed exactly as it was. Simple. Clear. Uncomfortable. I am not unseen because I am invisible. I am unseen because I am not looked at. That sentence followed me everywhere the next day. At school, during class, while Sarah talked, even while I walked through the hallway. It didn't feel like a thought anymore. It felt like something I had finally stopped avoiding. Sarah noticed I was quieter than usual again. But this time, she didn't ask right away. She waited until after school, when we were sitting near the library steps. "You've been thinking a lot," she said. I looked at the ground. Maybe. She tilted her head slightly. Is it good thinking or bad thinking? I almost smiled at that, because I didn't know how to answer. It's real thinking, I said finally. Sarah didn't speak for a moment. Then she said softly, that sounds heavy. I nodded. It is. For the first time, I didn't deny it. At home, things continued their usual pattern. My brother's stress had passed slightly, and the house returned to its familiar rhythm of attention, shifting entirely back to him. My presence became background again. Dinner was prepared. Conversations revolved around him. Future plans were adjusted for him. I moved through it all like I was following instructions in a place I didn't design. One evening, while setting the table, I dropped a glass accidentally. It slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. The sound was sharp. Instantly, my mother turned. Her expression hardened. What are you doing? She snapped. I froze. I'm sorry, I said quickly, bending down. My brother didn't even look up from his phone. My father sighed. Be careful, he said, annoyed. No one asked if I was hurt. No one checked my hand. I picked up the pieces carefully, feeling a small cut on my finger sting slightly. But I didn't say anything, because I already knew the reaction. Later, when I cleaned the last piece of glass, I looked at my finger. A small drop of blood. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to remind me I was still human. I wrapped it quietly and continued setting the table. That night, I noticed something different inside me. Not pain. Not sadness. A kind of quiet detachment forming. Like I was watching myself from a small distance. At school the next day, Sarah asked if I wanted to study together again. I hesitated, then nodded. Okay. But even as I agreed, I felt a small resistance inside me. Not toward her. Toward everything. During study time, she noticed it again. You're not fully here, she said. I looked at her. I am here. She shook her head gently. You're physically here. That sentence lingered. Physically here. I didn't respond. Because she was right. At home, presence didn't mean acknowledgement. And I had learned that too well. Later that day, something unexpected happened. A teacher returned our graded assignments. When I got mine, I saw another top score. A perfect mark again. For a brief second, I felt nothing. Then a memory surfaced. Earlier years. When I would have hoped to show this at home. When I would have imagined a reaction. Now, I didn't imagine anything. Because imagination had stopped producing outcomes. At home, I showed it anyway. Not because I expected something, but because it was routine. My mother glanced at it. Good, she said automatically. My brother didn't look. My father nodded slightly. That was it. No chain. No shift. No impact. Just confirmation that nothing changed. I walked to my room afterward and sat on my bed. I didn't feel disappointed. I didn't feel surprised. I just felt consistent. Like reality had finally stopped pretending to be different. Sarah messaged me later asking about homework. I replied briefly. She asked if I was okay. I paused before answering. Then wrote, yes. But I stared at that word for a long time before sending it. Because I wasn't sure what okay meant anymore. That night, I didn't open my notebook. Instead, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling. Thinking. Not about what I wanted, but about what had always been true. I thought about my brother's laughter in the living room. About my mother's soft voice when she spoke to him. About how quickly the house changed when he was upset. And how nothing changed when I was. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't even rejection. It was structure. And structures are harder to fight than emotions. Because they don't argue. They simply continue. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual again. Not because I needed to. Because I couldn't sleep. I got ready slowly and looked at myself in the mirror. For a moment, I studied my face. Not critically, just observing. And I realized something quietly. I didn't look like someone who was waiting anymore. Waiting had a certain softness to it. A certain openness. I didn't have that anymore. At school, Sarah greeted me like normal. But she paused when she saw me. "You look different today," she said. I frowned slightly. "How?" She thought for a moment. "Like you've stopped expecting something." I didn't respond. Because she had said something I hadn't fully admitted yet. Maybe I had. During lunch, she tried again. "You can't just shut everything out," she said. I looked at her. "I'm not shutting everything out," I replied calmly. She frowned. "Then what are you doing?" I hesitated. And for the first time, I didn't have a simple answer. So I said the only thing that felt true. "I'm noticing." That word. Noticing. It hung between us for a moment. Sarah didn't reply immediately. Then she said softly, "That can be dangerous." I looked at her. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because once you notice things, you can't unnotice them." I didn't respond. But I already knew that. Because something had already started that I couldn't stop. And I wasn't sure anymore whether that was loss. Or the beginning of something else. After Sarah said that, once you notice things, you can't unnotice them, I kept thinking about it more than I wanted to. Because she was right in a way I didn't know how to argue with. Some realizations don't arrive like answers. They arrive like weight. And once they settle, they don't leave. At home, the pattern continued unchanged, but I was no longer inside it the same way. I could see it now. Not just experience it. My brother's voice filled the house as usual, talking about his studies, his plans, his frustrations. My mother responded instantly, adjusting everything around him without hesitation. My father listened carefully, as if every word mattered. And I moved around them like a quiet detail no one needed to highlight. But something inside me had started separating. Not from the house physically. From the expectation of being part of it emotionally. One evening, I was in the kitchen when my mother called me. Her tone was sharp. "You forgot to do the laundry properly," she said, pointing at a small mistake. I looked at it. It was minor. Fixable. "I'll do it again," I replied. She sighed, already losing interest. "Just be more careful," she said. No anger lingered. No discussion followed. It was correction, not conversation. Later, my brother came in and spilled juice on the counter while laughing on his phone. My mother noticed. She shook her head gently. "It's okay, just clean it," she said softly. That difference, that invisible line, it stayed in my mind longer than it should have. Same mistake. Different reaction. Same house. Different rules. At school, Sarah was more attentive now. As if she had started noticing the change in me too. "You've been distant," she said one day during class break. I didn't look up immediately. "I'm here," I said again. She sighed. "That's not what I mean." I finally looked at her. Then I said something I hadn't planned. "I think I've always been distant," I said. Sarah went quiet. Because she knew I wasn't talking about distance in space. We sat like that for a moment. Then she said softly, "That sounds lonely." I paused. It should have felt like an emotional statement. But instead, it felt accurate. So I nodded. Yes. No denial this time. That evening, something happened that broke the usual rhythm slightly. My father called me into the living room. I stood there unsure. My brother was there too. My mother sat nearby. My father looked serious. "You need to choose your college application soon," he said. I nodded. "I want to apply out of state," I said again carefully. Silence followed. My mother immediately shook her head. "We already discussed this," she said. My father leaned back slightly. "It's unnecessary," he added. I felt my throat tighten. "It's not unnecessary," I said quietly. "It's my education." My brother gave a small laugh. "You're making it dramatic," he said. That word again. Dramatic. As if wanting something was an exaggeration. As if speaking about my life was overreacting. My father looked at me firmly. "You will stay close to home," he said. Not a request. A conclusion. I stood there for a moment. Something inside me wanted to argue. To explain. To insist. But another part of me stayed still. Because I had argued before. And nothing had changed. So instead, I said softly, "Why him and not me?" Silence filled the room instantly. My brother stopped smiling. My mother frowned. My father's expression hardened slightly. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I looked at him directly. "He gets choices," I said. "I don't." My mother replied immediately. "That's not true." But her voice lacked conviction. I continued anyway. "He gets support when he struggles. He gets attention when he succeeds. He gets understanding when he fails." I paused. "And I get told to adjust." No one spoke. The silence felt heavier than any argument. My father finally said, "You're comparing things that aren't the same." I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. Then I added quietly, "I am." Because that was the truth I had been avoiding. I had been comparing my entire life without admitting it. Because the comparison was constant, even when I didn't name it. My mother stood up slightly. "This conversation is over," she said firmly. My brother looked uncomfortable now. Not guilty. Just uneasy. Like the structure of the house had been briefly disturbed. I didn't argue further. I simply turned and walked back to my room. But something had changed. Not outside. Inside. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed for hours, thinking about what I had said. Not regretting it. Not justifying it. Just replaying it. And for the first time, I realized something important. I hadn't been asking for extra love. I had been asking for equal existence. And even that felt unacceptable to them. At school the next day, Sarah noticed immediately. "You did something," she said. I gave a small shrug. "Not really." She studied my face. "You look lighter," she said. I didn't respond. Because I didn't feel lighter. I felt exposed. Like something I had kept inside for years had finally been spoken aloud. During lunch, Sarah asked, "What happened?" I hesitated. Then told her. Not everything. But enough. When I finished, she didn't interrupt. She just listened. And when I stopped speaking, she said something quietly. "That's not normal." I gave a small, tired smile. "I know." She shook her head. "No, I mean it's not acceptable." I looked at her. That word felt different. Acceptable. Because in my home, I had learned that acceptance and permission were the same thing. And I didn't have either. That night, I opened my notebook again. For the first time in days. And I wrote something different. Not about invisibility. Not about pain. Just clarity forming slowly into words. I am not confused anymore. I am just not agreed with. When I closed the notebook, I didn't feel relief. But I also didn't feel confusion. Something had shifted. Not toward peace, but toward understanding. And understanding, I was beginning to realize, changes everything, even when nothing around you changes at all. After that night, when I wrote, "I am not confused anymore, I am just not agreed with," something in me started behaving differently. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly refusing to shrink as easily as before. At home, the structure stayed the same, but I no longer moved inside it the same way. It's strange how small internal shifts can make familiar spaces feel unfamiliar. The kitchen still smelled the same. The living room still carried the same sounds. But I was noticing everything now with a kind of clarity that made it harder to ignore patterns. My brother's presence still shaped conversations instantly. My mother still adjusted her tone, depending on him. My father still centered his attention around his progress. But now I could see it without needing to emotionally absorb it. That separation changed something. One evening, my brother asked for help again with his studies. I helped him as usual. But when he made a dismissive comment afterward, I didn't react like before. Normally, I would have stayed quiet and swallowed it. This time, I said calmly, "Don't talk to me like that." He looked at me, surprised, then laughed slightly. "Relax," he said. My mother immediately called from the kitchen. "What happened?" she asked. Before I could answer, my brother said, "Nothing, she's overreacting." And just like that, the moment dissolved. But something inside me didn't. At school, Sarah noticed my change again. "You're speaking more," she said. I shrugged slightly. Maybe I'm just tired of staying quiet. She studied me carefully. "That sounds like progress," she said. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure if it was progress or exhaustion reaching its limit. During class that day, a teacher praised my answer in front of everyone. It was normal. It used to mean something to me. Now it felt like a spotlight that didn't change my position in the room. People clapped. I nodded. And that was it. No emotional reaction followed. Sarah leaned toward me later and whispered, "You didn't even smile." I looked at her. "I used to wait for moments like that," I said quietly. "Now I don't know what they change." She frowned slightly. "Maybe they change you," she said. I thought about that, but I didn't feel changed by praise anymore. I felt unchanged by it. At home that evening, I tried something different. During dinner, I spoke without waiting for an opening. "I want to apply for scholarships out of state," I said. The room paused. My mother immediately responded, "We already said no." I kept my voice steady. "I'm going to apply anyway." My brother looked up from his plate. "You're serious?" he asked. I nodded. My father put his spoon down slowly. "You are going against what we decided," he said. I met his gaze. "I'm choosing my future," I replied. Silence followed. Not the usual silence of dismissal. This one felt sharper. He leaned back slightly. "You think you can decide alone?" he asked. I didn't look away. "I think I have to," I said. My mother's voice tightened. "You're being influenced," she said immediately. I shook my head. "No," I replied. "I'm just thinking." That word again. Thinking. As if thinking itself was dangerous. My brother spoke quietly, almost uncertain. "You don't need to leave," he said. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger toward him. Just distance. "I don't need permission to leave," I said. That line changed the air in the room. My father's expression hardened. "This discussion is over," he said firmly. But I didn't move. For a second, I stayed seated. Then I said something I had never said before. "Then I'll do it without discussion." My mother stood up slightly. "You are being disrespectful," she said. I nodded slowly. "Maybe," I said, "or maybe I'm just finally speaking." No one responded immediately. The room felt tense in a way I wasn't used to. Not explosive. Controlled. Like something holding itself together tightly. Finally, my father said, "We will talk about this later." But I knew what later meant in our house. It meant never changing the conclusion. Still, something had been said, and it couldn't be unsaid. That night, I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel relief. I felt something more complicated, a strange mix of fear and clarity. Because once you speak against a structure you've lived inside your whole life, you don't suddenly become free. You become noticeable. At school the next day, Sarah immediately sensed it. "You did something big," she said. I didn't deny it. "I spoke," I said simply. She nodded slowly. "And?" I looked away. "And nothing changed," I said. She smiled faintly. "Sometimes nothing changes immediately," she said, "but something already has." I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I didn't argue. Later that day, I found out my mother had spoken to a relative about me. Not angrily. Concernedly. "She's becoming difficult," she said. The word difficult followed me home that evening. Not because it was new, but because it was predictable. Any movement I made outside their expectations always turned into a label. At home, I overheard my father again. "She needs control," he said. Control. Not guidance. Not understanding. Control. I stood outside my room listening, and for the first time, I realized something clearly. They were not reacting to who I was. They were reacting to who I was becoming without permission. And that difference would always matter more than anything I said. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my notebook again. My hand hesitated for a moment. Then I wrote, "I'm not asking anymore." When I closed it, I didn't feel lighter, but I didn't feel smaller either. And somewhere in that in-between space, I understood something important. The world doesn't always change when you speak, but you do. And sometimes, that is the first shift that cannot be reversed. After that night, the house felt different in a way I couldn't explain to anyone else. Nothing had physically changed. The furniture was the same, the routines were the same, the voices were the same. But I wasn't the same inside it anymore. It was like I had stopped blending into a place I once tried so hard to belong to. At breakfast the next morning, my mother barely spoke to me. Not anger. Not argument. Just distance. My brother talked normally, as if nothing had happened. My father avoided looking directly at me. And I noticed something new. Silence was no longer something I was trapped in. It was something they were placing around me intentionally. At school, Sarah was waiting for me near the entrance again. "You're really going through it at home, aren't you?" she asked quietly. I didn't deny it. "Yes." She nodded slowly. "You look like someone who stopped asking for permission," she said. I gave a faint, tired smile. "Because I did." She studied me for a moment. "Are you scared?" she asked. That question stayed longer than expected. I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I said finally, "but I'm more tired of staying the same." Sarah didn't respond immediately. Then she said softly, "That usually means you're already changing." I didn't fully agree, but I didn't disagree either. Because change didn't feel like strength. It felt like instability. At home, pressure began building in quieter ways. My mother started checking my actions more closely. Not openly controlling, but watching. My father began asking fewer questions and giving more instructions. My brother stayed mostly the same, but there was a subtle awareness now that I wasn't fully in my usual place. One evening, my mother called me into the kitchen. Her tone was controlled. "We heard you're applying out of state," she said. I nodded. "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "You're making this difficult for everyone," she said. I looked at her. "I'm not making anything difficult," I replied. "I'm making a decision." She frowned. "You don't understand how things work," she said. I paused, then said quietly, I understand how they've worked for me. That line made her stop for a second. Not because it was loud, because it was precise. My father entered the room then. We are your parents, he said firmly. I nodded. Yes. He continued, we decide what is best for you. I looked at him directly. And when I disagree, I asked. Silence. Not immediate anger this time. Just silence that felt heavier than usual. My brother walked in midway through the conversation, sensing tension. What's going on? He asked. No one answered him immediately. Then my mother said, nothing important. That word again. Nothing important. As if everything I said could be reduced instantly to that category. I felt something inside me tighten. Not emotionally this time. Mentally. Like clarity sharpening further. That night, I didn't go to my room immediately. I stayed in the hallway for a while after the conversation ended, listening to the house settle back into its usual rhythm. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like something I was passing through, not living inside. At school the next day, Sarah noticed immediately. You look like you didn't sleep, she said. I didn't, I replied honestly. She hesitated. What happened? I thought about it. Then said, they want me to stop applying. Sarah sighed softly. And you? I looked at her. I won't. That was the first time I said it without hesitation. Not as an idea. As a decision. Sarah nodded slowly. Then it's going to get harder, she said. I didn't respond. Because I already knew. At home, things escalated slightly after that. Not loudly. But firmly. My father stopped discussing it and started stating outcomes. You will stay here, he said one evening. Not a discussion. A statement. I replied calmly, I will still apply. My mother's voice rose slightly for the first time in a while. Why are you doing this to us? She asked. That question stayed with me longer than expected. Because it reframed everything. As if my decision was an act against them. Not an act for myself. I looked at her. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm doing something for me. The room went quiet. My brother looked uncomfortable again. Not involved, but affected. My father finally said, this is not acceptable behavior. I nodded. I know, I replied. And I meant it. Because I finally understood something clearly. Acceptance in my house was not about understanding. It was about agreement. And I was no longer offering that. That night, I packed a small folder with my documents. Quietly. Without announcement. Without explanation. Not because I was leaving immediately. But because for the first time, I was preparing for a future that didn't depend on permission. As I placed the folder in my bag, I paused. Not out of fear. Out of realization. I wasn't just applying to colleges. I was applying to exist somewhere differently. And that thought didn't feel like escape. It felt like distance forming. A necessary one. Before sleeping, I opened my notebook one last time that week. And I wrote, I am not trying to be understood anymore. I am trying to be heard, even if it changes nothing. When I closed it, I didn't feel relief. But I didn't feel trapped either. Something had shifted beyond emotional reaction now. It was structure. And once structure begins to crack, even slightly, everything starts to sound different inside it. The days after that felt like living inside a tension that never fully relaxed. Not loud conflict. Not open confrontation. Just a constant awareness that something had changed permanently between me and the space I grew up in. At home, conversations became shorter. Answers became more controlled. My presence felt noticed in a way it never was before, but not in a welcoming sense. more like resistance being observed. My brother stayed mostly neutral, but even he sensed the shift. He stopped joking the same way around me, stopped assuming I would always stay silent. And my parents, they became careful. Not kind. Careful. Like they were dealing with something unpredictable. At school, Sarah noticed it too. "You're different now," she said one afternoon as we walked. I looked ahead. "I've been different," I replied. She shook her head slightly. "No," she said, "now it shows." That stayed with me. Because she was right. Before, everything I felt stayed hidden inside me. Now it had started showing in how I spoke, how I stood, how I refused to shrink immediately when spoken to. Even my silence had changed. It wasn't passive anymore. It was intentional. One day, the college application confirmations started arriving. Emails, notifications, documents. I sat with my phone in my room, reading them slowly. Each one felt like a small step outward, from a place that had defined me without ever including me fully. My hands weren't shaking, but I noticed something unusual. Stillness. Not emotional shock. Just steady acceptance that things were moving regardless of permission. Outside my room, I could hear my mother talking to my father. Her voice was tense. "She is serious about leaving," she said. My father replied, "We need to stop this." Not discussion. Control. Always control. But this time, something inside me didn't react with fear the way it used to. It reacted with clarity. Because I had already started something they couldn't quietly undo. That evening, my father called me into the living room. My mother and brother were there. The atmosphere was different again. He spoke directly. "We are deciding this once and for all," he said. I stood still. He continued, "You will not go out of state. You will attend a local college. End of discussion." I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel small in that moment. I felt separate. "I've already applied," I said calmly. My mother immediately reacted. "You should withdraw them," she said. I shook my head. "No." Silence followed. My brother shifted slightly, uncomfortable. My father's voice lowered. "You are disrespecting this family," he said. I took a slow breath, then said something I had never been able to say before without collapsing inside afterward. "I am not disrespecting you," I said. "I am refusing to disappear." That sentence stayed in the room like something heavy had been placed down. No one spoke immediately. Not because they agreed, but because it didn't fit into their usual responses. My mother's voice softened slightly, but not kindly. "You are being influenced," she said again. I looked at her. "No," I replied. "I am finally thinking for myself." My father stood up slightly. "You think you can survive alone?" he asked. I paused, then answered honestly. "I think I've been alone here already." That changed the silence. My brother looked down. My mother turned away slightly. My father didn't respond immediately, because there was no easy correction for that statement. That night, nothing was resolved. But something else had ended. Not the conflict. The illusion that I was being included in decisions about my life. At school the next day, Sarah didn't ask immediately what happened. She just looked at me and said, "You look like you didn't back down." I nodded slightly. "I didn't." She smiled faintly. "Good," she said. But I didn't feel good. I felt exposed. Because once you stop backing down, everything around you starts adjusting to your resistance. At home, the atmosphere tightened. My mother spoke less but watched more. My father stopped discussing and started deciding in silence. My brother stayed neutral, but distance grew between us too. It wasn't anger. It was realignment. I was no longer fitting into the role they assigned. So they were trying to reshape the structure around that absence. but I wasn't returning to the old shape anymore. One evening, I sat alone in my room after receiving another acceptance email. I stared at it for a long time, not celebrating, not doubting, just absorbing, because I realized something important in that moment. This wasn't about leaving a house. It was about leaving a version of myself that had learned to survive without being seen. And that version had carried me here. But it couldn't go further. Before sleeping, I opened my notebook one last time. And I didn't write about pain, or invisibility, or injustice. I wrote something different, something final. I do not need to be chosen to exist. When I closed it, I placed it on my desk instead of under my pillow. For the first time. Not as protection, not as secret, but as something finished. Outside my window, the night was quiet. And for the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like something I was waiting to be allowed into. It felt like something already moving toward me, whether anyone approved of it or not.